everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 5 of TRIGUN Stampede. And I think I wore this shirt for a TRIGUN reaction like a couple weeks ago, but I was like, I like this shirt a lot, so I'm like, well, we're just going to repeat history. Only, I think that was episode 2, and that was before we got into, like, me really being on board with this series. So I'm like, all right, let's restart this. I am really sad because I had taken some notes from the comments to talk about during this reaction, and I left work today. I'm on holiday for the rest of the week. I won't be back till Monday of this coming week, and yeah, I left the notes there. So this series, along with like 2 or 3 other series, I'm like, oh, all of my comment notes I left in my office. So I'm like, ugh. So unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to talk about those this week, but fortunately next week I'll have even more things to talk about. So yay. I guess. I was like, oh crud. So yeah, that's how that's going. So fun times. But yes, we are on episode 5 of TRIGUN Stampede, and I'm really excited. We got to introduce to Wolfwood last week. Wolfwood's here. Soya's playing him. I could not be happier. I'm like, yes, please. And also Wolfwood is working with Zazie. So some behind the scenes trickery happening. What can we do? So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the development of Wolfwood and Vash's relationship. They're great foils to each other already. His interactions with Roberto are interesting. I'm digging the flirting with Meryl, and Meryl's just like, ew, no. She's Vash's. What are you talking about? And it's just overall, I really like where this series is headed. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding Knives, the mysterious bowler hat man he's working with, and the little girl. No clue who she is. What? I'm so excited to find out more about them. But they're talking about like Vash opening up gates and seeing like he might be an energy source they're going to try to utilize. And Knives is totally chill with using his brother for nefarious means. And Vash is just a sweet summer lamb. One thing I do want to comment on that had been noted, I think it was by KA, and I remember this, is that Vash's voice actor, oh, there were 2 things. I do remember them from my notes. So we can't talk about them. One is that the DJs so far on the radio stations have been the voice actors of both Vash and Knives from the original series. So I'm like, that's so freaking cool. So it'd be awesome if all the DJs were just voice actors from the previous OG series that were just like making little cameos. That'd be so cool. I would love that to pieces. And then the other thing was that the new Vash, the current Vash in Stampede, his voice actor is the same voice actor as Mekamaru from Jujutsu Kaisen. So who knew? What a different character you're playing. So the range, I'm all for it. But yeah, so my dogs, I got home, I sat down, I wanted to watch this episode. My dogs are barking, wanting me to play with them, but that's not going to happen until we're done with this episode. So hopefully they'll be nice. But I'm not holding my breath. They're corgis. What can we do? So yeah. But I'm excited, y'all. I hope you all are too. To dive into this episode, yes. And see what all we get. Right? No, go lay down. They're looking at me like, how dare you, plebeian? So yes, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in and see what we're going to get with old TRIGUN Stampede. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoy, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to start episode 5 of TRIGUN Stampede. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, I have spoilers to talk about, but we're going to save those spoilers for Spoiler Corner. Wow, this episode, it went a lot of directions I did not anticipate it going, and it's messing with the timeline, and I'm like, what? The idea that this place has been pretty stagnant for at least 20 years is absolutely insane to me. I was like, because what you think is going to happen is that Vash is showing up and he's going to meet this little kid, which technically he has, that you think he's going to meet this kid and rescue him from getting sacrificed. But that's not what happens. And the fact that all of this has been going on for a while now, but at the same time is starting to gain momentum is, I didn't bring Whiteboard Coon out because I wanted to talk through it, but And I didn't think I would have a lot to write on Whiteboard Coon. But it's very interesting, and I like what this episode is doing because Vash doesn't change. Because he looks exactly the same, apparently, from start to finish in this series. Because he hasn't looked like he's aged, you know, in 20 years. Because of that, it allows the story to kind of mess with your perspective about time. Because Vash looked the same all those moments he's met Rolo, you just look at him and go, oh, well, it's just Vash, it's fine. But then you're like, no, wait, time has passed and we can't really trust the narrative. And the idea of the story is not being linear is really, really good. I like it a lot. So, but yeah, let's go through this episode. Man, when you are placing wind turbines as an alternate source of power, it's really all about location, location, location. My thing is, why did they use solar panels? I guess they don't have the technology to create solar panels. So the wind turbines is the more low maintenance, low tech way to get power than a solar panel. You've got to find a way for the solar panel to work. So I get that. But man, putting a wind turbine in a desert is a really bad idea. It doesn't blow. The wind doesn't blow a lot in the desert. So, ugh. And the idea about religion being incorporated into this, the idea of the angels, that Vash and his people are seemingly angels as well as plants. And they're like life-giving and trying to like create this cult to pray to them. You know. That's interesting. Pray that God shall send the angel of salvation our way. Which is basically like saying, you know, Knives is positioning. Do I think that Knives would have a God complex? Yeah. I think so. I think that's been pretty evident for how he's been, you know, a Shakespearean villain up until now. But, man, and the crazy thing about it is that we see the tapestry like in the beginning with the mom and the son, and things look dingy on the outside, but then they get dingier as we go through. But we have the idea of this eye, the eye with two, and it looks like a plant, it looks like a sunflower. Imagine that. And there's the eye in the center, but I like that you have 3 lines going up, 3 lines going down, and it's like, it's perfectly symmetrical, and it kind of seems like Knives and Vash because they're the brothers, and, you know, we think that they're kind of like twins, maybe. So we have that because they look around the same age. We have that, praise the angel, honor it, and become the angel's eyes. Which is rather interesting because the idea of becoming the angel's eyes means watching for it. Watching for the angel, reporting to the angel, being like gatherer of information for the angel. I mean, it's basically establishing a cult, right? But it's so fascinating. And then this mom, the idea that there are people in this village and the boy was praying for the wind to blow. Otherwise, you know, he thought he was going to die. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this episode was really, really good, right? Lots to talk about. So yeah, I like that we're traveling along the desert. I like that Wolfwood's cross has now been added to the luggage on top. And they're just like, we're having, the religious radio is not doing it for us. And it's really, really hot outside. And it's going to be like, I'm assuming they're saying 50 degrees Celsius, which is like 100 degrees outside. And so what's interesting is that Roberto brings up the Church of Plant Worshippers, or, you know, worshiping the angels. And they're a newly established sect. I mean, it seems rather intriguing that all of a sudden, now by newly established, we don't know if that means within the year, within the last 20 years. We don't get like a full confirmation because Roberto, you know, has been around the bush for a while. But it would make sense that Knives would be the one to cultivate this religious group in the hopes of trying to find Vash, in the hopes of like, you know, trying to encourage people to do whatever they want them to. Because Knives doesn't like humanity. Not at all. But it seems like what a great way, and how ironic that the guy that would like to destroy humanity is trying to use humanity by getting them to pray to him and being subservient to him. Imagine that. I'm also noticing there's a little cup holder beside Meryl on the right-hand side, which is fun. And so Roberto talks about this desert used to be a normal color and then suddenly was dyed crimson. His dad joke and the stupid story that he tells, blah. I will be honest, Roberto's probably my least favorite character in Trigun Stampede at this point. He's such a dad, and this story that he tells Meryl is like the daddiest of dad jokes. It's just like it's secondhand embarrassment nearly, right? And she's like, really? And then we see Vash has awoke at this point and is talking about overnight the blood of its victims painted the whole desert. Then what they're talking about is Rollo. They're talking about Rollo showing up and killing everybody and painting the desert red. Like, Rollo showed back up in the town, killed everybody, and has been just roaming aimlessly around the town ever since, waiting for Vash. And Vash is now going back to find him. It's interesting that how they mess with time, and it makes sense now that we've seen the episode in full, but how they mess with your perspective of the timeline and when things happen in certain places. Absolutely insane, right? And he's like, wasn't that chilling enough? And she's like, womp womp. I will say, the running gag that Meryl is about to run into something on the road, I can't blame her. If Roberta wasn't distracting her, it wouldn't happen. I do like that it's a running gag that she's about to, like, hit everything, right? And then they get out and see the worm that has been dead for a while. And the idea the worm's been dead for a bit, that it was one strike barehanded. So, and they're like, barehanded? And he's like, yeah. Did one of Million's knives gang kill it? And it's like, maybe it was the monster I just told you about. And she's like, no way. And he said, it's been dead for a while. Even if knives did it, he's long gone. So, could it have been Vash killing the monster to save the boy? Could it have been the boy Rollo once it became, like, souped up, like, you know, it became the Shredder, basically, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. Could it have been that? We don't know exactly. Not exactly sure about that. It's just very interesting that thing has been destroyed at this point. And then Vash is already heading towards the city, which Vash knows exactly where the city is. Child of Blessing. What a name of an episode. And the timeline getting messed with, I'm just fascinated. And the fact that it's weirdly quiet. The plant's gone, could have been stolen. He's like, no, it was never here to begin with. These are just like remnants of a ship is what they look like. And the people tried to settle there. And then the idea, it should have all became apparent that the city's been abandoned for so long because he was looking through the trinkets and the items and the sand is like filtered over them. There's no wind, so that shows you how long it's taken for the sand to filter over it. The fact that it's so covered in red dirt means that, like, yeah, it's been there a while. So yeah, the city's been abandoned for so long. Absolutely insane. And that's when Rollo, as the monster, the juggernaut here, basically tries to attack him. Now, I don't know, we'll talk about it in the spoiler corner a little bit more, but Roberto constantly has to save and pull Meryl back, and I'm like, girl. Also, the fact that she has those white-ass shoes, and those white shoes have not been, like, affected by the sand, the most unrealistic thing about the show. I'm kidding. But yeah. And so then Vash immediately knows who it is. Vash can see right through and see that it's Rollo. Now, I thought for a bit that it was a bit that it could have been like this individual was working with Wolfwood. Kinda is, because Wolfwood knows enough to know by the end of the episode where this monster came from and how Rollo came to be in that state. He understands what's happened and where this is originated from. I also like that they had, like, the death mask. It was giving me very Doctor Who vibes from, like, the library episode where you couldn't quite see the face. I wanted to see what was under the mask, and then you see it at the very end right before Rollo dies. But, yeah, just crazy. And you don't know exactly what's going on. And then Wolfwood... Because, yeah, Wolfwood's gun doesn't exactly do much. And at first I'm like, is he really trying to hurt Rollo, or what's the deal? But... then we go back and forth. The storytelling elements of this episode where we go back and forth with the boy are really well done. They were really executed well. They make you wonder what's happening. You're like, is this the present? Is this now? What's going on? Is he gonna is Vash gonna leave town and go? Because when the kids start running away, I was like, oh, well, the kids escaped while this monster's going through town. Vash is just gonna go out and find him and save him. But no, it's a totally different time period. It's so well done. I was like, damn. And the kid finds out that he's going to be sacrificed. Now, we see the one woman telling the mom, and she doesn't look like the doctor or anybody. And so Rollo, and we find out that all the people that were sacrificed were basically made into experiments by this doctor. Imagine that. Imagine that. But damn, it's so messed up. And he's like, thank goodness you're still alive. Now it makes sense that Vash knew it was Rollo the whole time and was trying to save him. Oh my God. But Wolfwood, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, Wolfwood meanwhile is like trying to get at him, and then Vash is like, oh, don't kill him. But here's the thing. The way that his body is, he absorbs the bullets. And Vash kind of seems to notice that, or Wolfwood seems to notice that. And I think that's what leads Wolfwood to be like, okay, well, normal shots and stuff are not going to kill him. He's just absorbing it. I got to do a straight shot through the head to get rid of him. And knowing that Wolfwood is probably working for Knives, Wolfwood doesn't want Rollo to say something he's not supposed to. And if Vash manages to, quote unquote, tame Rollo, it could be a possibility that Rollo would say something that would make Wolfwood have to act and hurt Vash a lot quicker than he may want to. So yeah, Roberto and Meryl didn't have a lot to do this episode. It was mainly a Vash, Wolfwood, and Rollo episode. It was mainly a Rollo episode because he keeps talking about Vash the Stampede. So yeah, so we're at Windmill Village. We see on the map here, imagine Windmill Village. I think of One Piece when I think of Windmill Village, you know, but we're there. And then what we have here, we have Trash's Wall. We have Albus Scutum. We have something nil. We went to Genora Rock already. We've been to the terminal. We still have Lowland. Hopeland Orphanage seems like somewhere that we're going to go to because it's in big letters. And then July. July is like way on the other side. Interesting. It seems like we're going from Genora Rock to around. So I'm like, how are we getting across the body of water? That's what's interesting is it says the Sand Lake. Knight's Fist. Because that was going to be the Great Sand Ocean. Oh, okay. So the parts on the map are not, the dark parts are not water. They're literally sand ocean. Like just desert land, no civilization in sight. Fun times. Cool. Wonder how that's going to go. So yeah. So Wolfwood gives Vash a hard time about his goody-goody routine. And about the fact that he's like, somebody ought to end you, like worrying about all this. And Vash is like, that's pretty savage, you know. And at first I thought it was just Vash being his typical like gentle nature, not wanting to kill the enemy. But it goes deeper than that. He has a personal connection with Rollo and he didn't want to hurt him. And he's like, well, stop playing dumb. You knew about this village. He's been here several times, right? And Vash is like, yeah, about that. And he's like, well, I don't know what happened here. Just that I keep coming back trying to help someone. So yeah, so he knew Rollo from when he was born. He knew Rollo as he was getting older. And he obviously didn't tell Rollo that he knew him from back when he was a baby. But knew that he was sick. And so he went off to find medicine for him. And the thing that sucks is that the mom asked Vash to find him. And what Vash didn't know was that they were going to sacrifice him. And the boy never said anything because he didn't want to worry Vash, right? He didn't want to worry. And so he's like, well, you're just the humanoid typhoon and all this. And he's like, you're a demon that causes natural disaster. And he's like, I'm sick. They say I'm going to die before I grow up. Maybe God won't save me because I don't believe in him. And Vash doesn't really say anything until the very end when he goes back to his mom. He doesn't say anything till they get back to the end. And then he's like, there's no wind and everyone's suffering because of it. And he's like, oh, well, it must be rough without a plant. And he's like, that's why I'm next. And Vash doesn't understand what that means. And before he can ask or say anything, the boy runs off and he says, was my mom worried? And he's like, yeah, very much so. And so as the boy's leaving, Vash is like, if God won't save you, I will. Which famous last words. What's fascinating about that is is this idea, and Wolfwood kind of touches upon it, but there's another series that I'm currently reading called Heaven Official's Blessing. If you've not read Heaven Official's Blessing or watched the Donghua, it's a Chinese series. You should. It's really great. But in that series, the main character is kind of similar to Vash in the sense that they want to save people. They want to be the savior for people, right? And I won't spoil anything, but that's kind of a mess. That character in Heaven Official's Blessing falls into the same problems that Vash does here, where they're like, don't worry, I'll save you, rely on me, I can do it. If nobody else will save you, I'll be the one to do it. Well, then things get complicated, and it's like, but then what now, because of this, this, and this? And they kind of fall into the same boat that Vash is in this episode, where it's like, yeah, he said he was going to save him, went off to get the medicine, but it was too late. And he made a promise that he couldn't keep. And Wolfwood kind of calls him out on it. And he's like, you shouldn't make promises if you can't keep. He's like, by the time I got my hands on medicine returned, Rollo was gone. And then Wolfwood's like, you talked a big game about saving him, but you couldn't follow through. And that's when we see the monster coming back out again. Only those who believe find salvation and love. Oh my God. And then, yeah, he gets taken to this mysterious place with the kid. Oh my God, with the kid that I thought was a little girl this whole time. No, she has the nails that are painted just like Zazzy's. Just like Zazzy's. They're having manicure parties. Zazzy and this girl. Manicure parties all around. And I like that now that we see her up close, her eyes are like this weird two-toned. And we also see that she's wearing lipstick, which makes her seem a little bit more mature. He's like, the man you praise as God is not here right now. Knives isn't here, but we are. Oh my God. And so yeah, basically he says, are you a sacrifice too? And all of the girls like think again. She's got like vampire teeth. She's like a vampire, the little girl. Oh my God. All I could think of was Claudia from Interview with the Vampire, because Claudia was like a little girl that was turned into a vampire when she was a kid. And so even as she ages, she stays the same size. Okay, well, she's terrifying. And like licks her finger. Yeah, I'm getting like lust vibes from her. She says, I'm an angel. And then the windmill burning. And the windmill burning is from him coming back and torching the place and destroying it, right? Now they talk about this experiment that's going to like basically jack his metabolism and jack him up, and of course side effects. But the table that he's on is shaped like a cross, which is shaped like the same weapon that Wolfwood has. So the Punisher, I'm thinking, is the weapon that Wolfwood uses. And that was the creation by this doctor to kill whatever, right? Interestingly enough. And then, yeah, the boy's like, I don't want to die. And yeah, going after Vash, and that's when Vash is like trying to disarm him. So they talk about how the implant in his brain will heighten his emotions and make it to where, you know, it will lead to an accelerated development of athletic ability. And he's like, hatred is a poison to the soul. So they think that because, you know, he died as a sacrifice, he's going to have this poison in his hatred in his heart, and it's going to make him like into a monster. But at the end, Vash was starting to get to him, it seemed. But we'll never know. And the girl like looking over there with her asymmetrical Karen haircut. He's the first to survive for 5 whole years. So none of their other experiments have survived for 5 whole years. So I don't think Wolfwood is the experiment. One, Wolfwood, this thing's been jacked up so much, I think Wolfwood wouldn't look so human and normal if he was an experiment. I think that the weapon he uses is the experiment, and he drinks this serum that allows it to like transfer through. So maybe the only experimentation on Wolfwood is that the cross is connected to his body, and when he drinks something, it powers through him to the weapon. Maybe Wolfwood's the only one that can use the cross. Maybe the weapon is only able to be used by him, and that's the experiment. We don't know yet, right? But he says this one is the first to survive for 5 whole years. And then the girl says, oh, he'll be just another failure. He's not a success. Her eyes are like two-toned, and she has these weird amoeba-like eyelashes coming out. The fudge? What is her deal? What? The two-toned eyes is creepy. Creepy as all get out. But then, yeah, he came back to the mom and then caused a ruckus. And Rollo. So the thing that's creepy is like this radio and stuff has been like, it has been playing over and over and over again for 20 years. And so now they said that back then, they said it had been 5 years since he had been a success. So, fascinating. Fascinating. And then they start looking around, and Shifa and the tapestry is like long been destroyed. And then they find the album with the picture, and they see Vash. And they're like, why is Vash so the same? What's going on? Hasn't aged in 20 years. I really like Roberto's face the way it's animated. It's very much a, oh shit. And now Meryl and Roberto have not said a word about this. They've not even asked the question about like, why are you still so young, even if it's been 20 years and you haven't aged? Nobody's asked that question yet, so we'll see. And then Vash is like, you're Rollo, don't you remember? And Wolfwood is convinced that he's a monster now and there's no going back. His humanity's all gone. But Vash didn't give up on him. Vash was like, no, it's okay. And he's like, I promised you, but I wasn't able to keep it. And he's like, you insufferable fool, Wolfwood. Because Wolfwood's like, I can't let you die because I'm supposed to take you somewhere, probably. And so he pulls out this vial and like spits out the cigarette. And he's like, I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm here to keep my word. He's like, you're not alone. You won't be alone anymore. Oh. Which is so sweet and sad, right? Yeah. And then Wolfwood like breaks the vial, drinks it, and it allows him to like use the cross and connect with it, right? He says, you dumbass. And fires his laser. And just, boop, nope. One hit KO. Oh, damn. But nope. Now, when we go to the desert and see, I didn't see Wolfwood standing in front of the cross because the cross is literally as big as his body. So I thought the cross was stuck in the sand and he was standing by Meryl and Roberto, which I was like, well, why would the cross be so catty-corner? I thought maybe Vash had like pushed him away or something, but no. And Vash is just like in denial that he's dead. And he's like, why did you shoot him? And he said it was mercy. He's like, you could not have returned his humanity. And he says, your hypocrisy is showing. You're the one saying things that you can't make good on. He's like, you said you were going to befriend Rollo, but what could you have done for Rollo? Like, at this point, what could have been done? You didn't save him before, and yet you were going to make a promise that you weren't going to be able to keep all over again. Ugh. Meanwhile, we go back to the doctor who has, like, a whole big old plate on his head, like he's been trying to keep his head together, but it allowed him to know that Rollo has died. And he does look older there, so there has been a passage of time. Meanwhile, the girl shows back up with Zazzy. Saves you the trouble of getting rid of a failure. Ah, I love it. Zazzy's like, want to redo our nails? It was another one of Doctor's creations that did the job. And she says, oh, was it Nicholas? Nicholas, was it? And he says, no, the Punisher. I love that we have Vash the Stampede and Nicholas the Punisher. Love it. Love it. Okay. And then, of course, we have Nicholas looking the other way. Ah, ha, 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 ha. We can't really see very well through the glasses. Ooh, hoo, 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 hoo. So, I mean, here's the thing. Nicholas could be an experiment by the Doctor as well, but a more recent experiment because Rollo was from 20 years ago. So Rollo was from 20 years ago. If Nicholas is 20 years old, maybe he was like 10 or so when he was experimenting on, so it could have been like 10 years later. The fact that the timeline is so wonky in this, I really like, because we don't get a full picture of what's going on. I like that. So it's going to make us kind of have some guessing to do as we go through this. So, yay! But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right? So, I've got some spoilers I want to talk about. Spoiler time is up next. So, yes. But before we get to that, I want to say, if you're not sticking around for spoilers, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll return next week with episode 6. Halfway through, can you believe it? Episode 6 of Trigun Stampede. Holy cow. I am loving how they mess with time in this episode. I talked about it earlier. Love it. The idea that you don't exactly know. Because, yeah, Vash is basically immortal. You can't tell how old he is. And so that's one of the really cool things this episode did, was play with time and play with the narrative and make you not exactly know, because this place hasn't changed in 20 years. Looks exactly the same, and it doesn't look much different from the start. So you can kind of do these really cool narrative twists where you don't see it coming, that no, Vash has been coming here for a while. It reminded me of the ship in the sky in terms of that, which was interesting. Wolfwood killing Rolo was exactly like Zazie, only with different effects. So let's go through this. Let's just talk some spoilers about this. I like the idea of there being religion involved with all of this, because yeah, it was kind of there in the OG, but not too much. But yeah, the idea that Knives is starting a religious cult among people that he wants to destroy, so villainous, so genius. And the fact that he uses that religious cult as a way to get people to, like, give him bodies to experiment on, and he doesn't care if they win or fail because they're humans and he hates them. Love it. All here for it. The girl, the fact that she's not a little girl, I was like, oh, hell yes, please. I am living for badass female villain character that's just like, what? Like this, like, kind of lust character from Full Metal Alchemist. I love the idea that she's this just kind of like, you think she's a cutesy little girl, and she's like, And I could totally see her playing that up around Vash if they meet, being like, I'm just a little girl, and be like, shank him, you know? Ah, love it. Love her and Zazie are probably doing manicures and her besties. Love that. So Zazzie's probably an experiment too, or maybe not. Maybe, is Zazie an angel? That'd be kind of cool if Zazie was an angel too. I would like that. They kind of have the similar nails. Would be all about it. Would totally dig that. There are a couple things I will nag about a little bit compared to the OG, because, and I really like Stampede so far. I do. I think Roberto is still the source of a lot of my nagging. That weird ass story about the ghost was kind of lame. I was like, what is this? Get out of here. Stop with the dad jokes. But there's moments with Meryl in this that I want her to be more badass. And in the OG series, Meryl is a badass. She has a whole coat full of Derringers ready to go, ready to shoot bullets at people left and right. She is fierce. She is strong. She is competent. And here, she's the newbie, the girl that knows the least of the crew. Imagine that. And it's just, she, like, the thing that probably was the biggest comparison from the OG series to this series is when her and Roberto are up against the building. Roberto has the Derringer. He's the one that gets the gun. He's the one that gets to be the protector in this situation. And Meryl's just sitting there hugging her knees, being like, I hope that you save me. Hell no. In the OG series, Meryl would have a whole, like, shelf full of Derringers on each arm, would be going at it, would be jumping into the fray. And that's kind of my big thing about this series, is that I don't like that they've kind of regressed her character a little bit to where she is relegated as to the damsel position. And maybe not the damsel in distress, but she is the least powerful person in the room. And she is the least experienced and has the least chance of defending herself of the four. Whereas in the original, Meryl was right up there, right? She was able, her and Millie were like on it. So that is a source of complaint for me from the OG series, and I hope it gets better, but I'm just like, really, as a female viewer, I'm like, justice for Meryl. Like, make her more badass, not just like, and she's the one that always nearly runs into things. She just has a lot of, like, archetypal female tropes that male writers give women characters that are frustrating to me, especially when I know some people are like, oh, Roberto's not a mansplainer, and I'm like, maybe not, but he has to be the defender of her, and I don't know. I've watched enough shonen anime at this point that's modern to see modern examples of male authority figures elevate the female characters that are their students, and this is not one of those examples. And so it is kind of like a point of contention for me, especially compared to the OG series where hashtag feminism was going on all over the place. I'm like, come on, 90s. But again, I like the idea of the plant worshipping. I like that. Skip that damn story. Although I do like that it ends up being a reference to Rollo, and we kind of tie back to that. I like that a lot. I wondered if Rollo was working with Wolfwood this entire time. Not necessarily, but Wolfwood knows what he is. So Wolfwood's aware of the experimentation that's going on and is possibly an experiment himself. So that's interesting. I'm wondering if the doctor is Chapel still. I guess we're going to find out. That could very well be. I also like the idea that the weapon, the Punisher weapon that Wolfwood is using, whether he is the Punisher or the weapon is the Punisher, I like the idea that he can drink a liquid and it connects him more to the weapon, and he can use it that way to fire this freaking laser beam. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. But yeah, what a crazy thing. Like the idea of them sacrificing this kid and then he becoming this weapon, this human weapon, and Vash trying to like get to him to bring back the old Rollo. It's crazy, y'all. So I almost said it in the reaction and discussion. I was like, oh shit. But Hopeland Orphanage, that's in big letters, like we're going to go there in the next few episodes. That's where Wolfwood's from. So one big thing in the OG series that I wanted to happen that didn't happen was I wanted us to go to the orphanage and tie back to that part of Wolfwood's background and backstory. And we didn't actually end up doing it in the OG series, which was fine, but it was one aspect that I was like, I wanted to know more about Wolfwood's background. And we got like an episode with him and Chapel that kind of talked about it, but I wanted more focus on it. So if we're going to do that in this series, that's awesome. I'm excited for that. I want to see that happen. Bring me the orphanage. I'm ready. Let's go. And plus, the whole center of the religious sect is in July, which is, you know, where Knives' hideout is. Imagine that. So we do talk about in this the whole idea of, you know, the goody two-shoes act that Wolfwood thinks Vash puts on, and how you can't save everybody, and that don't make promises you can't keep, etc., etc. And we kind of have that, you know, brought back up in this episode. The whole experimentation on the boy, on Rollo in there was creepy. The visuals were creepy. Don't like that. And that little girl seems like that little girl's had the same dress for 20 years. Get that girl a new frock. Right? I am curious how Meryl and Roberto are going to handle Vash being ageless and if they're going to bring it up. I'm curious if they're going to do that in this because they know now, but we didn't really have time to bring it up before we were on the road again. Now, the elephant in the room is that Rollo dies the same way that Zazie does, in that Wolfwood shoots him through the head. I will say this. It's not that I have a problem with it. I think that it's handled pretty well in this. But here's my thing. If you've watched the OG series, it built up the entire time that Vash was trying to constantly save people and not kill people. And my dogs are barking, so you have to excuse them. But it was built up the entire time that Vash was trying to save people. He didn't want to kill his opponents. He wanted to spare them and try to, like, save them, quote unquote. And that was kind of Vash's whole thing. And then at the end of, like, the third act, right before the third act of the series, when Vash, like, has an opportunity with the villain, Wolfwood lashes out. And here's the thing. The OG series not only builds up Vash trying to be compassionate towards everybody, it also slowly builds up Wolfwood not being compassionate and killing people if necessary. And then they come to a head in the episode where Zazie ends up getting killed because Wolfwood ends up killing him after Vash was trying to be like, it's okay. And then they reach an impasse. Now, in the OG series, Vash and Wolfwood come to terms, and they kind of have an argument with one another, and then they kind of distance each other for an episode before things with Wolfwood's backstory happen. Here, they kind of come to a head, but then we've not had time in the series to properly build up between the two of them their ideologies, so it just kind of clashes, and then by the end of the episode, they just kind of like end up in a van together, and it's like, well, what can we do? I guess we'll just keep going. And there's nothing really consequential that comes of it, whereas in the OG series, Vash and Wolfwood separate, and they go separate ways, and they just distance each other for a while. So, but I mean, this is only a 12-episode series. It seems like next episode or two, we might be getting closer to Wolfwood's backstory. So there's that. So I don't want Wolfwood to die by episode 8. You know, rule of 8, but I don't want Wolfwood to die in episode 8. No, please don't. Please don't do that. I hope Wolfwood lives in this series. I would like him to live, please. But I don't know. I just don't know. So, yeah. But it is interesting to see how they handle the discussion. Because right now, Vash doesn't really have an answer for Wolfwood. And they just kind of like drop it and get in the van and drive away. Whereas in the OG series, there is a serious philosophical debate, and we have some distance between us, and we're mad at each other, and then we kind of reconcile at the very end. So it's handled differently. I personally like the way the OG series does it better because I think it has more emotional impact. But I did like this episode in terms of how it was constructed. The whole story with Rolo was fascinating, and I love the way that it was taken care of and the way that it was handled. I love the mystery with the doctor, the girl, Zazie, all of this. I love the idea of incorporating the religious cult. The only things I didn't like about this episode, spoiler-wise, was Roberto's involvement yet again. Roberto really has nothing to do other than scold Meryl, and it's gotten a little old for me, but I will tolerate him as long as we get Wolfwood and Meryl. I'm like, if he lives and Wolfwood dies, are you freaking kidding me, show? And then Wolfwood, and it was just that, and the fact that Wolfwood and Vash's ideological argument was just like put out there, and then it didn't really go anywhere, and they just kind of dropped it. I have a feeling it's going to come back, hopefully. Going to come back and be a thing, but we'll see. So, yeah. And I can't believe I thought it was Jopsep for a while. I was like, I thought it was the son that had been like brought back as a zombie. That's a fun time. So, anyway, I really enjoyed this episode a lot. It was a lot of fun, but it's gotten me even more excited for next week. So that should be a fun time. So I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below, but I also hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 6 of Trigun Stampede. Bye!